Hey everybody, welcome. We're back from a week hiatus and we're kicking off our return with a masterclass session. Now today we're going to be showing power users how to blend their biomes on their fantasy world maps. This seems to occur where users sometimes kind of overcomplicate the process of kind of blending your biomes because you have so many on your map that you kind of get overwhelmed and you're not certain how you're going to do all of this blending. And then this point of this stream is basically going to show you some very, very simple techniques with just a small list of steps to do. So this is going to make it so much easier to blend your biomes. Hey, Andrew and Bitter Dan. Hey, Musical Rogue, glad. Oh, so many people here, so many lovely faces. Welcome, everyone. Again, we're going to be focusing on blending our biomes. Good one, Bitter Dan. So as you can see, I have a map already here. One thing you'll really notice about this world map is that there isn't really much for kind of a transition between the biomes here. For instance, look carefully at this desert below the red line, and you'll notice there's like a savanna north or above that red line right there. So how is it that I would cause some kind of transition between these two biomes? And there's a lot of different techniques that I use. They're all very simple. They range from using edgy brushes or a soft brush, or even just using object shadows, using light sources. There's all these different things that you can do to blend biomes, and having that diversity of options is going to be helpful for you because not every technique that I employ is something that you might want to use. It may not be quite as applicable to the map that you're making. So having lots of choices, when of course those choices being very easy, will make it rather nice. So we have a first time chatter. Hey, Purple X 22, glad that you are here, by the way. So glad you can finally catch the stream. So again, we're blending some biomes. So the most easiest technique that I know of is this technique of taking two of the textures. That means that savanna biome and that desert biome. And I'm going to go ahead and try to find those textures. And what's really, really simple is that when you go into the catalog, and sometimes when you go into the catalog, you'll notice that recently used only has a certain number of amounts that you can see. And so when I go to blend these biomes, a lot of these textures are not going to be in there. But what's really, really helpful is if you just go right into the catalog, there's a little add filter here and just say used in this map. Now, every single texture that I have used on this map will now be available for me to see. This is very, very helpful when you've ran out of room and you can't seem to find that texture that you used maybe an hour ago, but it's not there anymore in the recently used because recently used has a limited number of spaces. So this is helpful. Now, the other thing that you can also do is just favorite it right away. Okay, so I'll show you how to do that. So if there's a texture that you like, maybe this green one right here, and you know that you're probably going to be adding a lot of textures, the really simple technique to that is just to add it to your favorites. And the way that you do that is if you kind of scroll down right here, you'll notice there's a little save to favorites. If I click that, it will go right over to my favorites, and then there it is right there for me to use it. So those are the two different ways that you can kind of do it. Now, I will mention one thing that is actually quite helpful. Oh, I see some first-time chatters. All three of you, welcome, all of you. Love to have you here. There is another thing that you can also do. I want to mention this, is that sometimes, let's say that you used textures from various styles. What happens is if you use the used in this map, it will only show the maps from the textures from the fantasy world style. Now, if you want to see textures from different styles, my recommendation is just to click that Inkarnate tag right there, up at the top in the middle. And then what's going to happen is it's going to load every single recently used or every single used texture or stamp used across all styles. So this is going to make it a lot easier to find those things. So used in this map, remember, if it's across multiple styles, you're absolutely going to want to click that Inkarnate tag because otherwise it's only going to show used from that particular style. Okay, so that's going to be helpful to you. So we'll go back to Fantasy World, recently used. Now we have the desert texture that I used right here, and then there's also this savanna texture that I used right here. Now there's a couple ways that I do to diffuse or try to make this line right here that you see, this line right here, it fades well enough, but there usually isn't just like a straight fade between two biomes. Usually there's some kind of wave of some kind going on. So the trick that I use is there are a couple ones when using a texture. One is to use the edgy shape. And this edge shape is really, really helpful. I turn my smooth off, and I'm going to bring my roughness all the way down to 3. The next step is to bring the opacity way down. If you don't do that, here's what happens if I apply that texture. You'll see what happens. See, it makes this really create hard line, and that doesn't look good. So the trick is to bring the opacity way down, and I mean like all the way down to about 15 or so. Once you've done that, now you can just go in like this and just start carefully painting in some of this texture kind of in here. And you can even go to, one moment here and I'll set this up. Go to your brush size and go to 1 or 0, and you'll still be able to do one little click like this. So just kind of do that all along that edge until you see some blending. Then turn around and use that exact same, then use that desert texture right here, and then now start going into the savanna. Let me bring the opacity up just a little bit more. There we go. And then I can start taking this texture right here and start making my way into the next biome. And you see what this kind of does. It starts creating some transition between the two. Now, if you look at the difference between using the edgy brush here and then not using any kind of transition here, you'll see there's a big difference, right? You want a very smooth transition from biome A to biome B. And the way to do that is through first texturing and getting rid of the two textures. You want to make it to where they blend into each other. Now, you don't have to use an edgy brush. You can also just use a soft brush. Let's do that. I'm going to take this. I'm going to use a regular brush. I'm going to make sure that my opacity is around 30% or so. And I'm going to make sure my softness is all the way up to 1. Okay. I'll also bring my size up a little bit. And then what I'll do is I'll start by just creating a little bit, kind of going inward like this. And remember, when you're doing this, think like a painter, right? When you are painting, usually when you're making a beautiful painting, you're not doing things with just one stroke, right? It takes multiple strokes to kind of get that blend that you're looking for. So don't try to think that you're going to get it all done in just 2 or 3 strokes. This is one of those things where you're probably going to be applying between 100 to 300, or if not 1,000 different strokes, depending on how many biomes you are. So expect a lot of changes. And my recommendation is after a certain number of changes, especially higher ones, when you start getting into the hundreds, especially 1,000, you'll start saving after that. For right now, we're okay. So I'll just kind of do this. And then I'll also be doing these single clicks. Now, I am using a pen, but I can also use a mouse as well. Here's me using a mouse. And I'm just kind of single clicking as I'm going like this. So wherever I see this, I'm just going to go ahead and change in, create this nice fade in here. And then I'll turn around and use that same orange right here, orange desert, and I'll just start creating some orange dots that kind of go into the desert. So it's really simple, complex, right? Or not very complex, it's very simple. You just take the 2 biome textures, the 2 biomes that you're blending together, and then you'll just single dots to break up that line. So now you have a very nice, smooth transition between the 2 biomes. Let's do a couple more so you can kind of see what it looks like by adding even more. So let's take that orange one. This time I'll use the edgy brush because I really like the edgy brush. I think it looks good. Just remember to bring the opacity way down. And I'm going to quickly save at 333 changes. Now, the edgy brush is one of my favorites. Just know that the cells within the edgy brush only get so small. So your scale, let's say that you have very, very small stamps, just know that there's a limitation on how big the cells are. So I would always go down generally to the smallest cell size or the smallest size of your edgy brush, because that way, because world maps are generally done in a scale where the stamps are really small. So that's not risky at all to do 10,000 changes at all, Bitter Dan. A little bit, walk a fine line there, my friend. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that brush size back down to 4, bring the opacity down back to 15, and then I'll go ahead and start doing that edgy brush transition right here. And I'll start getting some nice little transitions here. Remember just to bring the brush opacity down. And I'll just go ahead and kind of just push that in. What's also really nice is to create like a cluster. Like let's say that there's not, let's say that even though there's some green, this little blob right here isn't connected to the big orange line. Sometimes just adding little globs, little dots like this is kind of helpful as well. That way it kind of looks like it's still transitioning quite a bit. So you got to first fade out that edge. And then along that edge, you can just start adding in some nice little pieces along the edge there to create that nice transition. So I'll do it all along here, push it in here, all along here. Let's go a little bit further in this way so it looks like there's a nice, really big fade in between these here. There we go. Push it upward into here. Let's do some single clicks up into here. We're going to go all Bob Ross on here, okay? Okay. So you'll see that blending is not complex, right? It's pretty simple stuff. It's just about trying to get rid of the line that separates the two biomes so it doesn't look like there is any kind of separation. It's a gradual transition from either this mesa wasteland to this forest plain over here. So that's really the trick on kind of putting that together. And already you'll see 128 changes. So it really does take up quite a bit of changes when you do it. I'll quickly save it, and then I'll talk about blending biomes outside of texturing, because there's some other techniques that we can do. In fact, what we will do is we'll use, let's go ahead and continue with texturing. Let's use alpha textures, because I want to say that you can also use alpha textures to create a nice blend between biomes. So let's talk about that. So if I go into that catalog here, I'm going to go ahead and turn off used on this map. I don't really need that anymore. But there's a series of alpha textures that are really helpful. Now, if you're kind of confused about what texture is what because of the alpha texture, it's really hard to kind of see them. If you go up here to the top and you click on this little thing right here, it says show names. And then once you have those names there, you'll now be able to see the name of each one of these kind of textures, because it's hard to tell what it is when you have this black or dark background and then you have these alpha textures, because an alpha supports transparency. There's artifacts in the texture that will show up, and then some that won't show up at all because of that alpha texture. So alpha supports transparency. So there's some couple things that you can use. For instance, you could use like a cracked ground. I think it's in Fantasy World, or maybe it's in Parchment World. Let me check real quick. There it is right there. There's this cracked ground right here. And what I use cracked ground for is for blending mountains, craggy grounds. One of the most basic biomes that you're going to have in almost every single map is going to be mountain ranges. And sometimes it's kind of hard to get the mountains to blend with the texture beneath it. Now, thankfully, most of those mountains have what's called a clipping mask, and that picks up whatever's on the FG layer. I'll show you what I mean by that. So if I grab this stamp right here, you'll notice that it's picking up at the base of it, or on the stamp, the texture that's beneath it. See how there's purple right there, there's green there. If I go on to here, you'll see that it's turning into this green color. If I move it over to here, it will have this orange right here. So you already have one thing that's baked in that's kind of helps with blending your mountain ranges with the texture beneath it. It's those clipping masks. But there's also some other things that you can kind of do to make it to where it will blend in. And I'll kind of show you how to do that. The first one that you can do is you can use object shadows. Like I can take every single one of these, maybe these mountains right here. Let's say that I want to take these mountains just like right here. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just select, let me select some different mountains here. Let's go with these right here. So let's say that I have these mountains right here and I really want to blend them in because it's not blending enough for me. You can just select those stamps and then go over to advanced settings. I'm sorry, not advanced. It would be under shadow. So it would be right about here, shadow, and then go to custom object shadow. And you'll notice that a shadow kind of pops up. What happens if I want to have like some brown texture kind of blending in with it without having to use a texture? You can totally do that. I can go in and just kind of pick a color that I want, and then I can bring the offset down like this underneath, and you'll see that that brown kind of blends in. I will move some of these cliffs and put them down because I'm noticing that the shadow, there's a clipping mask on these cliffs. So what I'll do is I'll select those cliffs and then I'll just turn off the clipping masks. And now you can see that at least the brown shadow is kind of blending in with it. So when you're blending in your mountains, you don't have to put 1,000 different brush strokes. You can simply just use object shadows. There's a lot of different things you can do with the shadows of mountains. You can make them into clouds, you can make it to the shadow of the mountain. There's all the different things. But when it comes to blending your mountain biomes, object shadows are a very quick and easy way. You just have to pick the color and change the vertical offset so that this shadow is beneath the mountain, so it blends in with the texture beneath it. Now, someone did ask, how did I do those plateau cliff type things? All I did was just take two cliffs and then put them together. See, one cliff there and that back part of the cliff there. It's really easy, just front and back cliff. That's it. Just make sure that when you do make a plateau like that, just make sure that you don't want to show the back face. You want to show the front face of the plateau. That's why when I put this here, you'll notice it's just a line. And if you don't like the line stamp that's provided, you can just draw your own. Just look up, just try to figure out what color the that stamp is right there, and you can just draw with a pen or your mouse whatever back part of the wall that you want. Okay, so kind of a cool trick there. Okay, so now that you know a little bit about that, we can also do, I kind of interrupted myself, but we can also do alpha texture. So this alpha texture is cracked ice, but we can change that cracked ice to a different color. We can use this cracked ground right here. I can go in like this and change it, bring the brightness all the way to black, all the way down to brightness, and then I can apply it underneath a mountain. And you would kind of expect, you know, the base of a mountain to have some cracked ground and stuff like that. So you can use this texture. You know, just know that you always have to change a little bit of the scale depending. I'll bring the opacity all the way up. I'm going to apply it so I can kind of just see it, to see what it looks like. And this kind of cracked ground texture kind of works fairly well to kind of blend. You'll notice that that black line work kind of blends in with the black or the darker line work of the mountains themselves, kind of creating this nice craggy effect. Now we can also use the cracked ice as well. Just this time, remember, all you have to do is just change the brightness all the way to black, and now you can use that texture as well. So what happens if I want to go in here and I want to add that cracked ground underneath this texture right here? I can just apply it like this, and I have this nice cracked ground underneath. So you can do that as well. It's just kind of helpful to kind of create a blend, because alpha textures are so helpful, right? Alpha textures allow you to keep the texture underneath by applying another layer of artifacts on top of that. And so it automatically already starts blending because it keeps some of the texture underneath and adds those artifacts. So alpha textures are a great way to blend your biomes in, even if it's across multiple biomes. So you could take that cracked ground texture and you could still apply it over here, and it would still kind of work over there like that. I'm using the wrong thing. I should be using a soft brush instead. But you see what I mean, right? So you can use that alpha texture and it can go across multiple biomes. So it's very helpful to kind of use those kind of things. So I'll quickly save it, and we're going to go across just a couple more techniques that I use for blending biomes. And I'll use also, we're going to cover shorelines. We're going to be covering maybe some snow, and I'm going to show you how to do fey. So all those different things, because there's a lot of different biomes that we haven't done. And what I want to do is I want to probably blend every single biome. So let's first start with doing a coastline. If I go in here, I want to choose some kind of texture for my desert. I can use this beige desert texture right here. What works really well is an edgy brush. Just remember, you're going to want to bring the opacity way down. You want to bring the brush size way down, and you want to bring I think that looks about right. We'll set to FG layer. And what I generally do is I just go ahead and just start along a coastline like this. And I'll just go over it lightly like this and just kind of apply. Let's actually bring the opacity up just a little bit more. Oopsie, that's the brush size. Bring the opacity up a little bit more. Let's go with 28. There we go. That looks good. And you can start to kind of put in a little bit of this yellowish kind of color. And I use the edgy brush because the edgy brush, if you already made your land, if you already made your FG layer with the edgy brush of the add mode of the mask tool, the edgy brush texturing works really well on those coastlines because it's adding also those kind of same cells into the map. So it really kind of blends in well when you do it that way. So if I go at like this and just kind of apply, I can add some of these as I want, like this. So I have a nice coastline here. Little coastline biome. If you want to make it a big coastline, then you would kind of make it go a little bit more inward. And then, of course, the closest to the shoreline is where you want to apply the most amount of strokes. So that way it kind of gets that nice bright color. But if I don't like that, I want to add this color. It's a little bit brighter. I can do that. Let's maybe add in some shoreline along here. Go in here like this, add in some color here. And then I have this kind of nice shoreline like this. So you have some nice beaches. So I can go everywhere I want along here and add that in there. So maybe I want to add a nice shore along here. We'll make it go inward here like this. And remember the trick. It's just the most strokes are going to be closest to the coastline itself. And then the further you get away from the coast, that's going to start to fade away. So just start adding in little pieces here and there. Don't add in too much. There you go. So adding in the beach is not complex. That Edgy Brush works really, really great for blending biomes, for adding in shorelines, all very, very helpful. Okay, so adding in shorelines, pretty easy stuff. Another really, really helpful one is that, let's say you have a river biome. Water is what sustains life. So wherever there's water, there's generally going to be life. And the way that you can show that is green, right? So let's say that I have this river right here, but right now it looks like it doesn't really blend. There's not a whole lot going along the river. So if I go into the catalog and kind of pick a green texture, let's use a bright kind of green color. And then wherever, right along the edge of my river, I'll add green like this because it's showing that there's water producing lots of life along that river. So I'll go to make sure to add a lot of that green along that river here, make it kind of pop out a little bit. Don't be afraid to make it kind of go inward a little bit like this. There we go, in here as well. And so you have this nice green life kind of growing right here in this biome. There we go. Yeah, that looks much, much better when you add in that green. And we can look for other rivers as well that maybe we want to add some of that too. Like there's a nice river right here that kind of splits the desert. So you could always add a little bit of green here, along here. You can even add a little bit along the desert here just to kind of show some kind of transition here. So add a little bit of green here. Just don't forget to put some rando greens out there and then kind of all along this here. So you have some nice green going on here like that. Very helpful. Let me take a step back. Is there any other rivers that I have? Yeah, there's another one right here. Let's go ahead and do the same thing. We're just going to add that green texture all along the river here. Just like before, you want the most strokes to be along the river shoreline itself and then have the green kind of just fade away into that biome. You can do the same thing with this lake right here, right? It's water, right? So you're going to expect a lot of life where that water is. We'll put it all along there. So very, very helpful. There we go. Where are we at for changes? 441 changes. So you can see that blending biomes is very, very, very time consuming, or at least it takes a lot of strokes, really. It doesn't really take too long, but just knowing these simple tricks about using the edgy brush or a soft brush or transparency, all these different things are very, very helpful. It shouldn't take too long. Looks like it didn't want to save there. If it ever does that to you, just close it out and then just press save again. Okay, because sometimes it is an online tool and there might not be enough memory or whatever reason. If you just wait a few moments and then press save again, it will save. This happens once in a while. It's happened to me, and it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I just let it save, and it should save this time. If it doesn't, then there are some couple things that we can do. See, it saved there on that second time, so no problem there, right? Now, I did notice that someone wanted to do some other biomes here. Someone mentioned some snow. That's a great idea. Let's do that. What I'll do is I'll change up this biome right here. I'll add a snow biome right up here. So I'll go ahead and into the catalog here and look for some snow. Let's use this one right here. I'll bring the brightness up just a hair. There we go. I'm going to use that edgy brush, and I'm going to make sure that it gets really, really into here like this. I'll really get that snowy biome up here. There we go. Got that snowy biome up here. I'll push it all the way up to here like this. And then don't forget, we'll bring that smaller brush size and then make it even smaller. There we go. And then this is how you make that transition, right? You start making those little dots to show some transition here. And then what I would do is that I would take some of these trees right here and some of these hills right here that are in there, and I'll start desaturating them to where they kind of start turning into this kind of whiter color. I'll bring the brightness up a little bit. And so to kind of show that they're in the snow, I'll change some of their properties so that they kind of look like they kind of match into that spot. In fact, I'll undo that real quick, and I'll kind of just pick these ones right here at the top. I don't want to select every single one of them, just these ones right here, and then maybe these right here. And that's when I'll go ahead and bring the saturation all the way down, bring that brightness all the way up, bring the contrast down just a little bit. And then you'll kind of see that these trees are kind of transitioning into snow. So another great way to kind of show a transition between a snowy and another biome is some of the trees, as they go into, the higher up they go into that snowy biome, you can start either adding snowy trees or just desaturate them, bring the brightness a little bit up. And in that way, it'll look like there's snow on them. And what I'll sometimes do is, if there's quite a transition, I'll give you an example. If there's quite a transition between maybe these trees right here and maybe these trees right here, I'll just kind of show you. So I'll have this one here, this one here. What I'll end up doing is I'll have this one be a little bit less, have a little bit more saturation. So I'll kind of bring it up to around here. And then this one, I'll have the saturation a little bit more up like this, and then maybe have the saturation up just a little bit like that. It just showed that there's a transition between pure snow and then going all the way down. So there's showing kind of a temperature difference by adding that kind of effect, fading your trees from looking like they have some life, where they look like they're kind of covered in snow the further up they go. So it's a nice little trick that you can do to kind of show a difference. And you can do the same thing with mountains, with hills, etc. A lot of different ways. And you'll notice here that I don't have any kind of transition here between this one. So I'll add in some single dots here like that, just kind of make sure that there's some transition there. There we go. And then of course, turn around and then use that same kind of texture. So if I go back into that catalog, I go over to here, where's the tag right there? We'll use on this map. And I do believe this is the texture I used right here. And I can go in like this and single click. Don't forget to add in some going inward as well, like this, when you're blending. It's nice to do both, not just taking one texture and then bleeding it into the other biome. You want to do both, bleeding into both sides of where the biome blends. This is a great way to make sure that it really has that kind of natural looking transition. There we go. So we'll go ahead and take a step back. You see we did quite a few changes there, but that's the easiest way to do it. There is one other thing that you can do that I recommend, is you can use a snow texture. And right now in Fantasy World, there isn't a snow alpha texture. But if I just click Inkarnate, it'll open up every single one, and you'll see that there's these nice snow textures. There's snow right here from Fantasy Battle Maps. That's got some snow on it. And there's this snow right here from Parchment. Let's go ahead and use this one right here. This texture is also really, really useful. If I just start applying like this, you'll start to see that there's a little bit of a fade kind of going on like this. And this is a great way to kind of make it look like there's a transition by adding in that snow like that. And it kind of helps to complement the already existing. Yes, I use the smooth brush all the time. It really just depends, right? And you can, it really just depends, you know. It doesn't really matter if you mix and match soft brush with edgy brush, or if you just use only edgy brush, or if you only use the soft brush. I kind of find that they all kind of work. The decision that you have to make really is an aesthetic one, right? As an artist or as a map maker, you want to decide which one of the techniques combined looks best, right? It's really an aesthetic choice, right? I think that it works either way, and generally people have different choices on what they want to make. So personally, I like the edgy a lot because the edgy brush does a lot of work for me already. You notice that it has these nice artifacts, and I really like that, and I think it adds a nice transition. Like, you'll see the difference here. Here's a soft brush here. It does have a really smooth transition here. This one's not quite as smooth, but I like those little cells. They kind of add a nice effect to it. So I kind of like that. So really the decision is really up to you on which one you want to choose, okay? I'm going to quickly save with so many different changes, and we'll go ahead and continue blending in the rest of the biomes using either the edgy brush or a soft brush, because I want you to see how I approach each one, but the technique is super simple. Just select both of the textures from each one of the biomes and then just make your way inward with little dots to, I don't know how to do, not sure what artistic word to use to kind of describe how it works. Diffuse the line, I guess. I don't really know. If someone there is much smarter than I am and knows the term for kind of like breaking up this line right here, please share that with me because I don't have any idea. All right, so I'm going to go back into that catalog. I'm going to go to Fantasy World, and then I'm going to go ahead and look for used on this map here. Now, there's one thing that I did do. I didn't save this purple texture. Is it diffuse? Yeah, diffuse would be the one I would use, but I'm not 100% certain. So I did make a boo-boo. I used the texture and I didn't save. I didn't end up saving the color. Well, this is pretty easy. Making a Fey texture is not complex. If you pick the kind of whatever texture you want, you can go over here to color adjustments. It's that little hamburger menu you see there with the little bars. And if you go, you can change the hue of a color that you want. See how I can change it to this kind of purple color if I want. I can maybe bring the saturation up, bring the brightness up a little bit, or I can bring the brightness down. I can bump up the contrast. A lot of different things that I can kind of do, right? Once you've made all those adjustments, if you're going to make all these different adjustments to the color adjustments or to the size or whatever, I totally recommend that you do favorite it, because what ends up happening is that when you edit a map's feature, when you edit a texture and you change its features, what it's not going to do is it's not going to show up in recently used or used on this map because it's not the default texture, right? You've made some adjustments to it. So you will absolutely have to go down and add it to your favorite. So I kind of made a mistake right here and I didn't save the texture. So what I'll do is I'll go over here and just apply that texture so it's on there like that. And now how is it that I would blend this one? Again, super easy, right? I just bring the opacity way down, bring the brush size way down, and then just apply like this. And I use a mix between pen and mouse. It's really up to you on which one you think works best for you. I find that obviously when it comes to blending textures, using a pen is one of the very few functions that's very helpful, is using a pen for that. I find that doing with a mouse is a little bit more meticulous, but it's not impossible. I'll actually work with my mouse that you can kind of see, but if you just take some simple clicks like this, just jitter your mouse around like this, you'll notice that it still works rather quickly, right? Even though I'm not using a pen, it still seems to be working, right? So just always remember that you can just single click real fast. Just look down at that counter of changes down there and you can see that there's a lot of changes kind of taking place when I do that. So just remember, you want to save a texture if you're going to make all these changes to it. Otherwise, you'll have to do it over again. You'll make the mistake. And I'm glad I made that mistake because now you will hopefully not make that mistake. And believe me, I've made that mistake many, many, many times. Yes, I use the map, use the tool all the time, but I repeat mistakes all the time. This is one of them. So just favorite it right away. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'll quickly just save it. We're doing lots of saving here with all these things. We'll continue blending more and more biomes here. If there's any biomes in here that people want me to make and you want to show how I blend those together, I can show you as well. Let's see here. Alpha snow to create a sea foam. Oh, sea foam on rocks. Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's say that you want to create like a chaotic coast line, right? Where there's like a lot of storms or something like that. You want to show that. You totally can. You can use someone was saying you can use that snow texture. If I go back to recently used, you'll see there's a snow texture here. This is a great one. Sometimes a coastline might be a rough or rocky coastline, and you want to show that coastline is stormy. Maybe you call it the Stormy Coast or the Stormlands or whatever it is, right? And you want to show that there is a storm. If you go over to the BG layer, that's going to be the ocean layer, right? You can take that. Again, I'm not going to use the Edgy Brush. I'll use the soft brush this time. So I'll bring the opacity up to around 30. And then you just start adding some snow like this along your edge, because your stormy coast is without a doubt a biome. And so if you start painting this edge like this, you can start to show that there's like some white water or waves kind of crashing against your coastline here. I find that that's very, very helpful. And I can also bring that scale down like this. And then I can kind of make it be a little bit smaller. So the closer to the shoreline, the bigger the artifacts, or the more I bring the scale up. The further I am from the coastline, I start to bring the scale of that snow texture down. There we go. And you can start to really kind of see that. Now, the other thing that you can do is there is another snow texture. You can use that same snow texture. There's another one that's a thicker one. If I go back to snow like this, just click Inkarnate. You'll notice that there's another snow. There's this more lighter snow, and there's this darker snow, or not really darker, denser. Let's use that word, denser. I can go ahead and do that one too. And then again, I'll just bring the opacity up a little bit. And then I'll just go really, really hard on that edge there and really add in a nice, really stormy kind of coast here. Now you can also make waves if you want to. If you just bring the brush size down a little bit, I'd say about, let's bring it down to about 2 like this. And you can also just draw waves like this. Now I'm using a pen for this, but you can also use a mouse. And what's actually kind of nice using the mouse is that it's a little jittery because as I'm adding it, there's a little bit of jitter, and that's actually kind of helpful when making a wave. Now it will be a little more time consuming because you can't use your wrist as much like you would with a pen, but it still works using your mouse, and it's okay. Normally a jitter with a mouse makes it very difficult, makes it kind of annoying to work with, but in this particular instance, using it is very, very helpful actually. So you can see that I'm adding in some very serious waves here. I can bring the opacity down a little bit more, and the waves that are further away will be a little bit lower in opacity. And why that's helpful is because, and I'm not sure if I remember reading this correctly, but the closer the shallower the water gets, the more pronounced the wave kind of gets because of its proximity, I think, to the ground. Maybe I'm incorrect on that. I sometimes mix up information on the documentaries that I read. So it's always good to kind of have, the further you get away from it, you don't have to show any waves at all. You'll just can show most of the waves in the white water in contact or in separation between your land and your water. So kind of helpful when you're kind of doing that, okay? So I'll quickly and save it. See a lot of changes. And I would do the same thing along just this whole coastline right here. Might not be a bad idea just to kind of show that there's some like snow as well here. So I'll put all snow all along this edge here. And you don't have to add any coastline at all if you don't want to, or any kind of waves if you don't want to. That's up to you. So I'll kind of add that there. Another one that works really well is you can also do that cracked ice. That texture would also work really, really well here. If I go back in here and just type in cracked ice right here and make sure that I got the scale right, I can do this as well. Let me put opacity all the way up to 100. And you can use this cracked ice to make it kind of look like there's some cracked ice along that ledge there. So another great transition between land and sea is that cracked ice. That kind of makes sense, right? The closer it is to the land, the more cracked that ice is going to be. And it kind of works as a nice transition between land and sea, between your two biomes, your land biome and your ocean biome. And you can do that same kind of technique with the snow along your shorelines as well. So if you want them, you can add them all along here as well. You want to show there's a little bit of snow along there. Maybe you want to add it to some of your lake or your river right here. You can do that as well to show like white water, like rapids or something like that. You can add a little bit of white in there. So a lot of cool techniques, a lot of things that you can kind of do to blend in your biomes. Let's just take a step back and look at it here. I'll quickly save, and then we'll finish blending in the rest of the biomes. There's quite a few left here, but you can see that I'm really just using the same 1, 2, or 3 techniques. It's just, using the 2 textures, whether it's Edgy Brush or Soft Brush, or if I'm using an alpha texture, or if I'm going to be using object shadows. So sometimes, like for instance, these cliffs right here, notice how they're not really blending in with the ground beneath them. I can go to select all from this set, then go over to shadow, custom object shadow. There's a little bit of a shadow there. Let's choose maybe a brown like color. So I'll go a little bit more into the orange to kind of get that brown. You don't want to go to reds. So I want to get that kind of nice brown color. I'll bring the intensity up just a little bit, and then I'll bring the vertical down a little bit. And then now if you look carefully, you can see that I'm kind of using this nice brown color to kind of cause these stamps to blend in with the texture underneath it. Again, kind of making it all kind of blend in better together. Hey, first time chatter, glad that you're here, by the way. All right, so lots of cool techniques that you can use to really make your biome really blend in well. Let's keep going here. I want to finish blending in the biome, so I'll go back to my fantasy world. I'm going to turn off that tag, and then I'll go switch over to used on this map. And then, of course, I have my dry grassland right here. So looks like I've already got a soft brush selected, so let's just use that. When it comes to soft brush, just like before, about 30% or so. Works good. Yes, the VOD will be available on Twitch. I save it as a highlight so you can watch it there, or I also save it to YouTube as well. So if you missed most of it, feel free to start from the beginning, either on YouTube or on Twitch. So, and for those of you who don't know, we just started now making sure that every single stream that we do on Twitch does get saved to Twitch. Before, they were just being deleted, but here they're being saved now. So you can watch them whichever way that you want them. Just know that most of them are on YouTube. That's where the majority of them are. We just started adding them, so you won't find the bulk of them on Twitch, but moving forward, we will be keeping them on Twitch, just so you know. So let's go ahead and do what we were talking about. We're going to do that next step here. I'm going to go ahead and use that texture and just kind of apply it onto here. Oh, I've got the BG layer selected, my mistake. Let's go ahead and apply that nice soft kind of edge there. And you can see the transition kind of going in here. Let's go ahead and add a nice patch right here. And then we'll add maybe a little patch right here. Let's add a little patch right there. And let's do some single clicks just around here like this to really, really get that transition. And in fact, I'll bring the opacity up a little bit and then bring the brush size down. And then I'll really get those single click. Let's bring the opacity up a little bit more, 58, there we go. And then I can really make those single clicks really, really visible. And I am using a pen right now, just so you know. I am using a pen. If you want, I can use a mouse. There you go, I'm doing a mouse. So you'll notice that the pen is a little bit faster, but it's still possible. It's not impossible. Just remember, it will be a lot of changes, but the process is really, really simple. It's not complex. It's just two textures and a lot of dots. That's really it. See how I kind of blended it in a lot more, right? I made that line, the difference, so incredibly different. It looks like that kind of savanna really, really pushes itself upward into that more grassy plain right there. That's really, really helpful here. Let's do the same thing over here. This time we'll use the Edgy Brush. And when it comes to the Edgy Brush, remember to bring it down to about 15, maybe even 20, and then just start kind of bringing in your single clicks with your edges. And just like before, I'll kind of create some big clusters up here, maybe a cluster right here. Let's really, really blur that edge right there. Let's do this. Put in this nice big glob right here. Let's maybe have the glob kind of connect upward into here like this. There we go. Now we really have a nice transition in there. Same thing here. There's no transition here, so let's really, really add that in there. There we go. And then I'll bring the opacity up a little bit more and just do some single clicks, randos. Just kind of have them go up into here a little bit. And it's okay to really, you can really mix and match. Let's say that, sure, this texture mostly represents this savanna right here, but if you can go as far into the interior as into another biome with that other biome texture as you want, okay? Because what that will do is, even though, as long as you have the majority of this green marsh-like texture in the forest biome above the savanna, as long as you have the majority of that texture showing and not the savanna texture that I chose, as long as you have that ratio where the forest biome has more of that texture than the savanna texture, then it should work just fine. As soon as you start adding like a lot like this, then it starts to look like it's just a part of the savanna. So be sure to just make sure that the ratio is there, right? You could do something like 20 to 80, 20% being the savanna texture inside of that forest, or it could be 30-70, whatever you want. You need to figure out whatever that ratio is. It's going to work best for you when you're putting them together. But you notice that it does blend really, really well together when you do it that way. And of course, I'm going to want to also use that grass texture that I used here and just kind of single click my way into here. And what I'll do is I'll really make it to where some of that kind of blends into here as well. I can even create some interesting shapes. Let's maybe create some like crack, like maybe it looks like a crack or a ribbon of grass like this. And I can really create some interesting shapes here. So I'll go in like that. Let's maybe put another one that kind of goes in like this. Another one that goes in like that. And then what you have is some really nice, interesting kind of transitions. And we'll do some single clicks here to kind of break that up. And that way you really have a nice transition. Experiment with it, right? Maybe you want to create some striations, right? Just going like this. Maybe you want to have some wiggly striations like I did here, going like this, right? Experiment, try different things. You'll notice that, you know, you don't have to be just single dots. It can be some strange striations. It could be blotches. It could be whatever, right? It's a very, very helpful to like be more creative. I noticed that I just showed you the basics, which is single dots, but those striations that looks like rivers, those really, really help to kind of transition the savanna up into that next texture, right? So very, very helpful to just really experiment and see which ones will work best here. I've noticed that there's a texture here. We should kind of transition that one a little bit. I think it was this texture right here that we used. That's fine. Let's do that striation technique we did. I'll have some striations. Let's go up a little bit, 39%. And what I'll do is I'll have a striation that goes along the mountain here like this. Let's add another striation right here. Let's add another one that kind of goes up into here like this. And you'll see that that works just as well as the single clicks, doesn't it, right? By adding in those kind of striations, it kind of looks like there's these ribbons of grass that kind of go inward. We'll do the same thing here. Let's go ahead and transition some of that into here. And then we'll even put some single clicks to really, really get that transition looking nice. There we go. There we go. Looks good. Just want to make sure those striations are really, really noticeable. There we go. Let me take a step back and look at it. Yep. That looks really, really nice. I like the way that that kind of transitions there. I want to do the same thing, I think, with that orange texture there. Like I noticed here that there's still kind of a flat line, but what happens if I kind of started creating these like strange tongues that kind of traveled inward like this? So if I go like this and I'll add like some striations moving in this way, maybe some going in like that, and here like this, going this way, maybe even have them connecting to each other like this to kind of looks like there's patches of grass. So I'm kind of just like making little circles like this. So that way it kind of has this nice little transition here. Very, very helpful. I'll just create these little circles. I'm using my pen here, just so you know. So I'm kind of creating these circles that kind of go like this. And then it kind of creates that nice kind of transition here. See, you're starting to see how helpful it is to kind of just explore a little bit. Don't just limit yourself to the dots. The dots is really the kind of basic form, but striations, different shapes, circles, dots, whatever, be creative. All of them work. And in fact, I would recommend using a plethora of different techniques when you're doing it. Don't just do dots. Do the striations, do shapes, do blobs, do all those things. That's going to be really, really helpful. So I'm going to continue doing that striation technique. I'll use this red texture here. And this time I'll try something a little bit different here. Maybe what I'll do is I'll create some big blotches like this. So I'll put a big blotch right there. Let's put a big blotch right here. Let's create another big blotch right here. Let's create another blotch right here, here, and here. Now that I've added those blotches, I can start single clicking around them and inside of them to kind of create this transition like this. And I got those single clicks. And you'll see that it really starts to kind of transform a little bit when you start adding that. So make the big blob first, small little dots after that to kind of diffuse the big blobs. So those small blobs and the big blobs kind of smooth each other out. So very, very helpful to kind of do that. So very, very, very interesting. I really find biome blending to be quite fun, and you can really experiment with all the different ways that you can kind of blend things together. So I think there's another biome right here. Where are we at for time? 49. Perfect. We'll blend the last couple biomes and then we'll call it good. I think I used this swamp grass here. Let me just verify. I think so. Yeah, I did. Let's try something different. Before I did the blotches, let's do the striations again, but maybe I can do something different. I'll have them maybe go in a certain direction. So I'll bring that opacity up just a hair to 43. And then what I'll do is I'll create these nice kind of striations that kind of lead, that kind of follow the border of the biome. So I'm kind of creating these striations like this like that. And I'll kind of have some of those striations, I'll bring the opacity down, and I'll kind of have them bleed a little bit into here. And I'll probably have them bleed a little bit into here so that way there's just a little bit more kind of transition. And I'll even single dot some of that. So that way I'm kind of using a lot of the same colors within that biome. Like that, so that looks good. Okay, and I think I'll even use a cracked texture. Let me go ahead and used on this map. And then remember I mentioned, if you notice that I can't see the cracked ground, if I go to Inkarnate, you'll notice that there's my cracked ground right there. So if I take that cracked ice and I'm going to bring the opacity all the way down or bring the brightness all the way down, I'll probably mess with the scale a little bit. And then I'll go ahead and apply that texture. I want to blend in my mountains a little bit. I'll use a soft brush and I'll just apply a little bit of that cracked ground right underneath my mountains there. And then you have this nice cracked ground that kind of blends in my mountain with this more mountain or lava like place here. And I'll even add it in here. Let me bring the opacity up a little bit more, and I'll really get that cracked ground up in the ice area as well. There we go. So we can really get that cracked ground in there. I'll put it some in here as well. That way there's a nice transition between these white mountains and the grass texture underneath it. So you'll see alpha textures are incredibly helpful. See how many changes that was? 366. So many changes. I think I got most of the biomes, but you saw what it looked like before when we didn't do any blending, right? It really looked kind of like those edges just didn't look well. And even now, there's probably some transitions even here, along here, that could do more. Just add more dots, or you could also just use that green texture and move your way into here. Let's go ahead and do that. I'll take this green texture right here, go back to brush. We'll bring that size back down, bring the opacity back down. And then I'll kind of single click some grass into here. Let's go back, sorry. Let's go about 21 there, perfect. And we'll kind of get a little bit more grass kind of moving inward. And I am using my pen here, just so you know. I'm going to use this to kind of try to blend a little bit more going in here, because right now it's not blending very well. So what I'll do is I think I'll fill in some of those circles with this lighter green color, just so it kind of looks like I'm kind of adding that in there. There we go. Single click our kind of way in there. There we go. Let's take a step back to see what it looks like. Yeah, that looks a lot better. So I think you got the general idea. Really, I just repeated a lot of the same techniques over and over again. I just really wanted to ram that into you because I think a lot of people, and this has happened to me in the past, it's just so easy to overcomplicate blending biomes. It's really not complex. Just remember the basic technique, the 2 biome colors, and then dots or striations or whatever you want. One, making sure that those dots or striations are going into both sides of the biomes, right? You're creating those striations or dots going into the desert as well as the savanna, right? And that way you can create a very smooth transition between the biomes. Okay, all right, well, I think that's it. I'll just quickly save this and then we'll call it good. I believe I am working currently on the stream calendar for August. We're going to be continuing on our Ancient City with the fantasy regional style. We're going to be continuing on part 7 of our Parchment World Map series. And we're going to be covering a couple other things as well, like light and shadow, how to create underwater regions with your battle maps. We're going to be showing you how to create regional battle maps. We're going to be showing you all kinds of fun stuff next month. So I'm really looking forward to all of that. So thank you everyone for making it to this masterclass. Feel free to go to our Discord and mention either on Discord, YouTube, Twitch, wherever you want to add a comment. Let us know what kind of content you want to see, whether it's in the masterclass format or on Wednesdays, or if it's just a regular stream for more casual users on Friday. So let us know what you want to see, because I want to cater to what you want, not necessarily what I want, but you want. Okay. All right. Thanks everyone. You've been great. I'm really glad to see you all again. It's been a week, so I'm happy to see you all. I will see you all on Friday. Okay. Please stay safe and healthy and merry map making. Bye everybody. Take care.